We are here to suspend our disbelief and have fun. Ooh, I called my shot and I was dead wrong. I think of all of the books that I've read here, that one has clung on to me like an angry little barnacle because we have to talk about the elephant in the room fucking its uncle. Hello! So I love a deep dive. I just love like talking about a book for like a really long time and really pouring myself into it. And sometimes I read things and I'm like, I've got things to say. I just don't have enough where I feel like it justifies giving you like the full scoop, you know? And this month I'm gonna be traveling, so I wanted to do something a little bit different. I want to do something a little more casual, okay? So I looked back at all of the things I read and I found a few that have like pretty different vibes from each other, but they've all got one thing in common. Today's theme is murder. Yes, every book we're talking about today is in some way murdery, murder adjacent, if you will. Normally I love talking about spoilers. I feel like I want to talk about the whole thing, and that includes the ending, that includes everything that happens. But this time I'm going to talk about some of these books without spoilers. Some of them are going to have spoilers, don't get me wrong. I will put the time code on the screen. I'll tell you when to skip if you don't want to be spoiled. And then you can decide, like, if you want to read them, come back and see my thoughts on the ending later. And if you're not, like, just enjoy. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start with some lighthearted fare. The first book we're talking about today is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. It's a romance that came out in 2023. It's the first book in a trilogy that's finished. It's like a trilogy of standalones. There's 3 brothers, and then like the 3 brothers are the love interests in each of the 3 books of the trilogy. Honestly, you probably don't have to read them in order, but this is the first one if you wanted to. So this is a romance between 2 serial killers. They are killers who kill serial killers. Our female lead is Sloane. By day, she lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. She does data analytics, but by night, she's the serial killer known as the Orb Weaver. And she got that nickname because when she murders the serial killers, she like disembowels them and she takes like fishing line and she draws up these kind of like elaborate webs kind of with their body parts in it. If you were to kind of like look at the web and kind of like put it into like ArcGIS or something, then like you would be able to find like where their bodies are hidden or whatever. That's her little move. Now, some of our more astute viewers may note that an orb weaver is a spider and a spider is not a bird. But we're gonna get to her nickname. Our male lead is Rowan, aka the Butcher of Boston. His thing is beating the shit out of people and being Irish. By day, he runs a nice restaurant in Boston. It's not a butcher shop. When we say Butcher of Boston, the butchering is it's not the of meat. So their meat cute is that they're hunting the same serial killer. So Sloane got there first, she killed the serial killer, but then she accidentally like locked herself in a cage with his body, as you do. And while she's just like sitting there killing time, waiting on whatever, she's singing this song that is definitely not Blackbird by the Beatles because they absolutely couldn't get the rights to that, but it's definitely like adjacent. And Rowan comes in and he hears her singing and thus he calls her Blackbird, hence Butcher and Blackbird. After that, they clean up and they go to a diner and Rowan is like fangirling her hard the entire time. Like he is a huge fan of not only her work, but her body. And they exchange numbers, but they don't like immediately build a relationship from there. They don't like text every day. They're not kicking it on the weekends. They're not flying back and forth to visit each other. But they do decide to like every year on like the anniversary of their meeting, they're going to meet up and they're going to hunt and kill another serial killer as like a cute little tradition. How do they find their victims? Great question. Rowan's brother finds them, I guess. His job appears to be vaguely crime. And why doesn't he give that information to the police? Because then the book wouldn't happen, duh. Honestly, the police are not really a presence. They're not even really a factor in this book, if I'm being honest. Imagine almost that these people are hunting serial killers because the police simply don't exist or something. They do exist. It's just like crazy how like not present they are throughout this entire book. So I would summarize this book's premise as like, would you like to see 2 horny hotties team up to defeat like the villains of famous horror movies? This is basically that. There's a Norman Bates type, there's a Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal type, there's a Leatherface type. Take your pick. With that in mind, like it was honestly pretty fun. And as you can imagine from everything I've said, like it really doesn't take itself too seriously because like there's just so much that doesn't make sense if you like think about it, right? Law enforcement, non-factor in this book. These total randos can find active serial killers before the police do. And they even know like their MO and where they hid the bodies. Like, do they tell the police? Do they drop a hint to the FBI tip line? Like, no, they won't. And don't you dare ask them to. We are here to suspend our disbelief and have fun. Am I at the police finding these killers? Who cares? Should they maybe leave these killers to the criminal justice system? Yeah, maybe, but again, who cares? Are the police onto them? Say it with me. Who cares? So Sloane's weapon of choice is knife, Rowan's is fists. Are both of those weak to gun? You betcha. But despite that, guns are barely a factor. And this would all be stupid and infuriating if not for the fact that this book is a romp and it knows it. Like, it is genuinely funny. The tone is surprisingly lighthearted. It is a quick read, and it's fun. Like, I had a lot of fun reading it. But I do feel morally obligated to warn you about the sex scenes. Is it a warning? Is it a spoiler? I don't know. You decide. Skip ahead if you want. The time code will be on the screen. Are they gone? Good. So I didn't expect this. But when they get together, their first time goes incredibly hard. Like, no holds barred, all holes filled, light choking, and more. And yeah, they're serial killers. Maybe I shouldn't have expected tenderness. Maybe I shouldn't have expected them to lovingly explore each other's bodies. Maybe a vanilla first time was never on the table and my dumbass just never realized that. But in my defense, the way that Rowan was described made me think that he was like kind of quirky. Like he's a golden retriever with a bite history. Like he says Irishisms like Egypt and feckin' hell, written in italics like the inscrutable foreign words they are. Like I don't know if I missed a description somewhere along the way, but I was kind of imagining him as this kind of like more like scrawny, wiry, but still muscular build, kind of think like a Flynn Rider or like a TF2 Scout. I honestly was pretty close to just like TF2 Scout, but really Irish. But then at the sex scenes, I learned that no, he's Mr. Muscles. This whole time, I should have been imagining like Irish Arnie or perhaps like Conor McGregor, whose IQ goes sub-zero when he sees a boob. And then all of a sudden, he's just kind of like doming her and like choking her. And even more that feels honestly impossible to describe in a YouTube appropriate way. It was gross, but like, can we just call it like cleanup and redistribution? Do you feel me? Do you know what I'm putting down? I don't know. It just felt like a lot for like, this is your first time doing somebody. It went really hard and I kind of just like didn't really expect that from the frankly very silly rest of the book. Anyways, that was Butcher and Blackbird. It was surprisingly fun, it was surprisingly funny, and it was a genuinely very enjoyable vibe. But like, wow, was it spicy. It was way more spicy than I normally prefer. But the book as a whole, not bad. Okay, so this next one I wanted to like so badly. It's The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. This came out in May 2025. It's a standalone, and it's only 352 pages, which made me think that it would go by so much quicker than it did. And it should have. I wish it did, but oh, it did not. So the cover is absolutely beautiful. Bring that bad girl out again, please. Look at her. Look at her. Like, this is genuinely so weird and so cool. I love it. Can we just marvel at it for a second, please? Okay, stop marveling. So it's this atmospheric horror fantasy set in a medieval castle. It's also billed as gay. It's a gay atmospheric horror set in a medieval castle. So there's this castle that's been under siege for months, and their situation has been getting worse. They've just about run out of food. Do they die? Not yet, but they are considering some light cannibalism. Think like the Donner Party cannibalism of necessity. It's business, not pleasure. The book is told in 3 POVs, all of them third-person present tense. Focine, who felt like the main character of the 3, she is this like former nun turned sorceress. She's a young adult, by which I mean she's like early 20s, not teens. She's paranoid. She's a little bit wacky, and she lives in like her incredibly messy and probably stinky tower. And she's done some magic. Like she's made these little like magic rats who are her companions, and she's invented these candles that never go out and don't melt. She also figured out how to use magic to clean their water supply, which was heralded as a miracle. And now the king is looking to her to invent food. Servoine is a female knight in the castle who's been assigned to protect Focine so that she can like figure out her little miracle. And she's a leader within the castle, or at least she's a respected voice. She is a veteran with real experience of times getting tough. And by tough, I mean cannibalism. The people here are way more familiar with cannibalism than average. And in my head, I kind of imagined her as like a Brienne of Tarth type. And our last POV is Trela, a servant girl who wants to kill Servoine because she beheaded Trela's dad at the king's orders. This sent Trela from nobility to poverty, and she really struggled. And she had to eat people, and she doesn't want to do that again. Also within the walls of the castle is the Priory, which is an order of like nuns / scholars / bee enthusiasts. They worship the Constant Lady, who's a kind of Marian figure, and their version of the Eucharist is honey. They're headed by the Prioress, who has a much smaller role in the story than I expected. Focine used to be one of them, and now she and they have light beef. Cow beef, not human beef. So important to speak clearly here. And then these divine figures, the Constant Lady and her saints, just show up at the castle somehow, despite the ongoing siege. And though they bring with them the miracle of food, they are not quite what they seem. And everybody goes literally crazy, and the whole thing quickly devolves into a cannibalistic gay fever dream. Did that sound cool to you? Like, I thought so, but unfortunately it really let me down. Like, it wasn't terrible, to be fair. Honestly, Ellen of Goodreads spoke for all of us when she said not gory enough and not gay enough. But more than that, like, the prose just didn't hit for me. It was regularly putting me to sleep. It wasn't like poorly written, don't get me wrong. It just kind of blathered at times. Like, I was in these characters' heads enough to hear their indecision and to hear them go like back and forth about what they might do and why they should do it. But I wanted like action, like not even fighting really. Like, I just needed them to do more, you know? And because of that, it felt so much longer than its 352 pages warranted. And the first half especially was hard for me to get into. It got better in the second half, maybe the last third. And I did really enjoy the climax. Like, I thought it ended well. But I feel like I don't want to endure the first half of a book just to like get to something that I enjoy reading. And unfortunately, that's going to be a theme throughout the rest of these. Now, about the prose, I read this. I read this with my own two eyes, but I suspect that it might be a little bit more compelling in audiobook format. Maybe in audiobook format, the whole like indecision, the back and forth, maybe it doesn't feel so dry there. I don't know. Give that a try. But there were parts I really liked too. Like, it felt so aesthetic, and I could actually really see it being like a good movie. Like, I could see it kind of having like similar vibes to like Midsummer or something like that, and I would probably really enjoy it. The book as it was written, it just didn't really hit for me, and I wish it did. It wasn't bad, it just didn't hit for me. All right, so maybe somebody's gonna get mad at me for calling this next book a murder book, because like that's certainly not the dominant theme of the book, but whatever, this is my video. It's The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. The book is set in the fictional kingdom of Dominion, and it starts in this time period that very much felt like mid-century England to me. The founding myth of Dominion is the story of Sir Una Everlasting, an orphan girl who became a knight and fought for the legendary Queen Yvonne to establish Dominion. And in modern-day Dominion, Sir Una is an icon. Think like King Arthur meets Britannia meets Uncle Sam, all in the body of a tall blonde woman who absolutely should be played by Gwendolyn Christie if they ever made a movie out of this. If you just have like a tall, beautiful, strong blonde woman, like, it's Gwendolyn Christie. In my head, there are no others. Our protagonist and really narrator is Owen Mallory. He's a self-described coward, a veteran, and a medieval scholar with a particular interest in Sir Una's story. One day, Vivian Rolfe, Dominion's Minister of War, summons him to her office. She says that Dominion needs him to help write the story of Sir Una as she goes on one last quest, and then she stabs his hand and makes him touch this magic book that sends him back into Sir Una's time. And Sir Una's time really has like kind of Arthurian medieval English vibes, and he accompanies her on her quest to slay the last dragon and to bring back the Holy Grail to the dying Queen Yvonne to save her. And he does this knowing that at the end, she'll be killed. That's how the legend goes. That's the story. That's always been the story. But as he journeys with her, he falls in love with her, and he doesn't want her to die. But if he wants to change the story, he'll have to literally change history. And that's the premise. I'm not going to spoil this one, mostly because, like, I thought it was really good, and I definitely think it was worth reading. Not like the other ones aren't, but it was just kind of like, there weren't things in the ending that I was kind of like, if I spoil this, whatever, right? Like, I genuinely think you should go read this. This was really different than a lot of the things that I've read before. Like, it had a lot of time loops, which I really didn't find too confusing. It's also written in mostly second person. It's kind of a fake second person because it's not like the narrator is addressing you, the reader, right? The first person is Owen, and he is talking to Sir Una. It's an I talking to a you, but there is a lot of like you being referred to. You get used to it. I don't think it would be right to call this a romantasy, really. It just doesn't really feel like it's part of that genre, but it is a fantasy. It is romantic. And even though it's like a time travel fantasy story, the characters felt so real. The villain especially feels incredibly real. They're not cookie cutter. They're not just like evil for the sake of being evil. The villain just has this absolutely insane level of ambition. And I do feel like this is kind of like a no, you don't under any circumstances have to give it to the Taliban or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, you gotta hand it to them. They've got ambition. Like, they're cold, they're practical, they're smart. They will go the whole damn 9 yards. Honestly, they're probably one of my favorite villains I've read in a really long time. I found them so compelling. My only real gripe with the novel was that I did kind of wish that we got to see their romance build more on page. It was a little bit insta-lovey. Why do they love each other? I don't know. They're supposed to. They love each other in every lifetime, whatever. But when they're in love, it's great. And their love is written so beautifully. I don't know. I loved it. It was gorgeous. I cried. Absolutely worth a read. Next, we have The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, another supernatural horror that came out in 2025. You might have heard of this author because she also also wrote Mexican Gothic. I didn't read it, but I've heard great things about it. So The Bewitching is a split POV, split timeline book. Because of that, I'm not totally sure how to talk about it the best, so I'm just going to kind of give you the timelines chronologically. And again, without spoilers. This is just me setting the premise. I will talk about how this one ends because I have a lot of thoughts here. So the earliest timeline is the 1908 timeline. It follows Alba, who is this young woman living on a farm in rural Mexico. Her uncle, Arturo, who's maybe like 5 years older than her, comes to visit from the city. Alba has such a crush on him. And let's get that out of the way now because, content warning, incest. If incest is a deal breaker, this is definitely not the book for you. Anyways, after he arrives, things start getting kind of weird. People die. I think animals die too. And Alba starts realizing that she's been targeted by like evil witchcraft. Ooh. And then there's the 1934 timeline following a woman named Beatrice Tremblay who's attending the fictional Stone Ridge University in Massachusetts. It's an all-women's university. I'm going to assume it's kind of like Smith College inspired. This timeline is told as Beatrice's diary entries, recounting the time leading up to and immediately after the disappearance of her roommate, Virginia Somerset, who vanished without a trace. And she also recounts her friendship with a very rich fellow student named Carolyn Wingrave. And Beatrice is of some importance because she went on to become a horror novelist, and that's how she caught the attention of the star of our, we'll call it current, most recent timeline. The book's main timeline is set in 1998, and it links to the other two timelines. It follows Minerva, who is Alba's great-granddaughter. She is a Mexican graduate student at Stone Ridge College, and she went there because she wants to study the works of Beatrice Tremblay. She studies Beatrice's diary at Carolyn Wingrave's house. She's now Carolyn Yates. She married Virginia's fiance after she disappeared. And things get weird and witchy for Minerva, too. So that's the premise. I thought this was going to be very exciting. It was not. First of all, I thought the prose was super boring. So I usually read books before bed. Before bed is my key reading time. This book was like reliably putting me to sleep for a lot of the first half. Even though I'm a before bed reader, that's not every book. Some of these books are driving me to stay up like way later than my bedtime. Secondly, I think this was the book that made me realize I don't really like a split timeline. I don't really like split POV timelines because I feel like they pretty much drag by design. We'll call it like a single timeline book, right? Like a standard plot. You know, you get setup, inciting incident, rising action, climax, resolution. But then when you have like the split timelines, that's really not how it goes. And so you end up having like setup, inciting incident, over and over. And this is a 350-page book that took 70 pages to get to the last setup. In the words of Dave Grohl, don't bore us, get to the chorus. If there's a book that you know of that's structured like this and doesn't drag like that, please tell me about it in the comments because I would love to be wrong about this. I am so happy to change my mind. Now, before we get to the third thing, this was one where I really wanted to talk about it without spoilers, but I really can't. I'm mostly going to. This next part is like spoiler adjacent, and then it's not like the main thing about the ending, but it is like a very key part of one of the timelines. If you don't want that spoiled for you, skip ahead to the time code on the screen. I won't be offended. Are they gone? Okay. Because we have to talk about the elephant in the room fucking its uncle. So remember how I mentioned in the 1908 timeline, Alba has a crush on her uncle Arturo. At first, she just seems to have like a little crush on him. He's only like 5 years older than her. It's not like he's like a 60-year-old man or something. At first, she just seems to have like a little crush on him, and he's kind of flirty back. I'm not defending it, okay? I'm not defending it at all. But I could see a world in which that was kind of innocent, right? Like maybe Alba admired Arturo, and he was like the cool, artsy uncle, and she'd love a guy just like him, but absolutely not him. Like, preferably with as few shared genes as possible. It does not go that way. It is not innocent. That was not for me. And to be clear, it's not presented in a way that's like the greatest love story of all time is this uncle-niece romance. Like, it's not presented as a positive thing. By the time she does get together with his uncle, like, it's consensual, but it's, you know, but it's not a joyful consummation of their love. But I was still just kind of like, girl, that's your uncle. Babe, what are you doing? Stop. And so when you take everything that I just said, like all of that feels like a recipe for a 1-star or perhaps like a DNF. And honestly, maybe I should have DNF'd it. I certainly considered it. I'm not above it. But the reason I didn't, honestly, was because like there's these little seasonal challenges that Goodreads has, and they give you these little fake achievements for completing them. And so if I didn't finish it, then it wouldn't count, and then I wouldn't get my imaginary prize, and then I wouldn't get the rush of being the best at reading books. I am glad I finished it. because like I really enjoyed the climax. It was very cool. I enjoyed that part a lot. Not enough to look past the incest, but it was enough that I ended up giving it 2 stars. And then immediately after reading The Bewitching, I went and picked up another historical split POV, split timeline horror. Even though I didn't like The Bewitching, I went and picked up a book just like it on paper. I am very smart and I make great choices. This one is The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. So there's a main timeline which is set in 2012. A construction worker finds a journal hidden in the walls of this parsonage in Montana. The journal belonged to Arthur Beaucarn, a Lutheran pastor, but it's about to become the focus of his great-great-great-granddaughter, Etsy Beaucarn. She's an unsuccessful communications professor who sees this journal as the thing that will finally get her tenure. But her stuff is mostly like at the beginning, a touch in the middle, and then at the end. The bulk of the book is set in 1912 as the contents of the journal. Arthur Beaucarn is a Lutheran pastor in a tiny town in Montana, and an Indian man of the Pecuni tribe has showed up at his church wanting to speak to him. His name is Good Stab, and he says that he'd like to confess. And then the book alternates between their POVs. Even though it is their diary, it'll be like Arthur Beaucarn's diary entries, and then the Good Stab passages that are almost told like he's monologuing them to you. Arthur's story deals with kind of the strange happenings in the town after he meets Good Stab. Like people have been brutally murdered and left outside of the town. That's weird. Good Stab's story is a lot more interesting. He tells the story of his life and how it changed forever when he ran into this Indian that he calls the Cat Man, because he acts like a rabid feral cat. And it's also the story of him getting revenge following the events of the real Marias Massacre in 1870. And as he confesses, Arthur realizes that he must have lived a lot longer than he seems. Because he has! Because this is a vampire novel. Surprise! It's not actually a surprise. I think it actually is in like the book's marketing. These vampires are a little bit different than your typical vampires in a way that like I thought was really cool. They can drink any kind of blood, but they take on the traits of the thing that they feed on the most. So like if they drank a lot of deer blood, they would start growing like antlers and like slowly turning into a deer. To look human, they have to drink other humans, but they can't just drink other humans because if they drank a lot of like white people's blood, right, they would start looking like white people. So in order for Good Stab to look like a native, he would have to like drink a lot of like natives' blood. I do believe that they can, it's a kind of thing where it's like they can drink from somebody without bleeding them dry, but it's difficult because blood's so tasty. And like normal vampires, they're hard to kill and they can't handle the sun. And throughout the course of the book, Arthur comes to realize why Good Stab is so invested in confessing to him in particular. And so that's the premise. I wanted to like this so bad, like it, because it sounds really cool, right? This was just another one where I really struggled with the prose. Like I said, Good Stab's chapters sound like they're just being monologued to you. And I honestly found those chapters to be like difficult to read. Not so much because of the content, but it's like the language itself made it difficult. He'll use Pecuni words and terms for animals that are kind of hard to follow. Like the Pecuni words are easy enough to figure out with context, right? Like I can figure out what he's saying, but it was like the animals were the ones that I really struggled with. Like for example, there's like prairie runners and packs of big mouths, but then he'll also say like jackrabbits and dogs, and there's not a glossary. And to be fair, like there doesn't have to be. And over time I did figure out what most of the animals were. And I struggled with Arthur's chapters too, don't get me wrong. I just struggled with them in like a different way. And like I said, it really does sound like he's monologuing them to you in a kind of boring way. And so that, plus like the language things, I just had a really hard time following the book. And then the entire like first half didn't really capture me. Like I lost interest in it really easily. I was losing focus. I would go back a lot just to kind of, because I would just kind of get lost in it, or I would realize that I was just kind of like not paying that much attention, and then I'd have to go back and see what I missed. The end result was that I really struggled to connect with a lot of it, even the parts that should have been very compelling because the prose just didn't work for me. I read some other reviews afterwards that confirmed that his sections were meant to be more of like an oral telling. And so I kind of wonder if this book would be easier to digest on audiobook, especially perhaps like a dramatized audiobook. I could see his chapters being a lot more compelling there. But like just as kind of like an example for like how that doesn't fully translate onto the page. Like he says something where it's like something is this high and you're like, well, like how high? Because I don't know where your hand was. But it's like if I heard somebody saying that, I feel like it would have felt more real. Or maybe something about the tone could have communicated that too. I don't know. Like, or I feel like I would have connected with it more. I also just really struggled with the pacing. I feel like I had to really push myself to finish it, and I almost put it down like several times. And so I ended up looking up like, does it get better? And I found somebody saying like, if you can just like make it to the 50 to 60% mark, like then it gets a lot better. And they were right. Like, once I got there, it was great, and I actually really couldn't put it down. But again, like, that really sucks, right? Like, because I don't want to have to, like, slog through the first half of a book to get to a part that really slaps, right? Like, why couldn't the first half of it slap, or at least be compelling enough to convince me that I should make it to that point that really slaps? Because again, like, once you get to that 60% mark, I loved it then. If that part slapped and wasn't hard for me to follow, like, why did the rest of the book have to be like that? It didn't have to be that difficult. Anyways, I'm glad I finished it. I think in the end, I think it was worth reading. I'm glad I made it to the climax. The last probably like 40 to 50% was phenomenal. I loved it. Should you read it? Maybe. Like, if all of this sounds interesting to you, then yes. Maybe consider giving the audiobook a shot. Okay, our last book is Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. I saved the most something for last. It's pretty new. It came out in 2025. It's a paranormal horror meets crime thriller. I read this last year and I've wanted to talk about it for such a long time. I have probably told everybody that I know about this book, and we're gonna get to why. That's not necessarily a positive thing. When I picked up this book, within the first few chapters, I was like, I love the prose, I love the vibe, I'm going to love this book. I called my shot and I was dead wrong. Like, it was probably the most let down I had felt by a book in like a really long time. This book is set in New York City in 2020 during the height of COVID lockdowns and then into the summer. Our protagonist is Cora Zeng, a young, half-Chinese, half-Midwestern white woman. She lives in New York City, she has OCD, and she very much exists in the shadow of her older, full Chinese half-sister, Delilah. At the start of the book, Delilah and Cora are roommates, but Delilah wants to move back to China with her dad. She's thinking of becoming a model, and she doesn't really want to bring Cora along. Cora wishes she was Delilah, not only because Delilah is a shining star, but also because Delilah is fully Chinese. She speaks Mandarin, and she just has like a way stronger sense of self than Cora does. So the book starts off with Cora and Delilah waiting for the subway. Delilah is unceremoniously and unexpectedly pushed in front of an oncoming train and beheaded. Cora doesn't quite see who did it, but she heard the killer say, Bat Eater. I'm not calling this a spoiler because it is in the description. If you pick up the book and read the back, you will read that. To be clear, Bat Eater is a slur, not a calling card. My dumbass did think it was a calling card at first. It's based on the whole like COVID originating from somebody eating bat soup at a wet market in China. That's been slurs explained. A few months later, it's August. There have been no leads on Delilah's murder. Cora is working as a crime scene cleaner with her Chinese and Chinese American coworkers. I'm sure part of this is working through her grief, but it's also because she has OCD and there's something kind of therapeutic about cleaning up the crime scenes. And she's not disgusted by the gore. But she begins to notice some really weird stuff about the crime scenes. 1, most of the victims are Asian women. 2, there are bats, sometimes living, sometimes dead, hidden at the crime scenes. You don't need your detective hat to figure out that something is up here. Meanwhile, Cora is starting to be haunted by a ghost. And because it's August, the Hungry Ghost Festival is coming up. And that's a Chinese festival where the gates to the afterlife open up and spirits roam the earth, and the living have to make offerings to them, I think of food, lest they be eaten by hungry, angry ghosts. I didn't know about this before. It was a really cool tradition to see and learn about. So at first I thought that the ghost was going to be like a metaphor for psychosis or perhaps OCD, but no, it's a real ghost and it's really hungry. And she can't see it, but its presence is there. One crime scene she cleans up is of an Asian cop who was murdered, and the ghost leads her to a USB drive under her bed. And all of this makes Cora realize that something is very much up. There's a serial killer targeting Asians, the cop knew it, and he was killed for it. And there are also some very spooky, ghosty horror scenes. I loved the spooky, ghosty horror scenes. So if you think all this sounds super neat and you want to read it, definitely skip to the time code on screen because we're at the spoiler part now. But if you want to know exactly where it lost me, let's keep going. Okay, so Cora investigates the killings, including what she found on the USB drive. It's full of pictures of the killed victims and the bats. Like, throughout the book, there was this journalist who was hanging out outside of the crime scenes trying to kind of get them to tell them what was going on there. And she tries to give him the files, but he won't touch them. And in fact, he says that he can't. And not like because of legal reasons. He's just like, ooh, we don't touch the Asian killing thing. And in time, the serial killer ends up finding her. And I can't remember exactly how she finds it. Maybe it was in another folder. Maybe she missed it the first time. But there are these screenshots from this like Stormfront-esque website showing pictures of the freshly killed victims. And it's not just one dude posting them, it's a ton of people. The spoiler for the entire book, like the who did it of it all, is that there is no singular killer. Instead, there are plenty of serial killers who are targeting Asian women for laughs and racism. And the Asian women are all kinds of East Asian nationalities, the implication being that these racists hate Asians, but they can't tell them apart, I guess. So the journalist wouldn't touch it because the mayor is in on it. He told the press to kill every story about the Asian women. And he told the police not to investigate any of the killings. And the cop was killed because he asked too many questions. And again, I really wanted to like this book. I thought I was really gonna like this book. But this was probably like the least plausible serial killer I could possibly imagine. Because literally every time I thought about it, there was like something else that didn't make sense to me. Like this book was haunting me. Because the book was the Hungry Ghost and it was eating me. I would just be going around doing my shit. A new reason that it didn't make sense would come to me. There was only one cop who gave a fuck about investigating crime. There was exactly one non-racist or Asian cop and they killed him. The FBI exists. They're federal and they investigate hate crimes. Why would they listen to the mayor? These dudes were out there catching bats. Nobody noticed that? Nobody wanted to report on the crazy dudes out there catching bats? If Tatiana Schlossberg can accidentally report on her cousin dumping a dead bear in Central Park, surely someone could report on this. Reporters were told en masse not to report on something and they just shrugged and said okay? In a world where Twitter and Substack exist? They were just like, well, if the New York Times won't cover it, then I don't really care. What? And then this racist website, like I think it was publicly available. No watchdog group was paying attention to the dark shit on nycracists.ru. There wasn't a single racist who was like, this is taking things a little far. I draw the line at murder. I don't like what Asian Haters Anonymous has become. Also, was this happening all over the country or just New York City? If it was just New York City, these people might have the worst murder OPSEC of all time. None of these Asian women had families or friends in the US or abroad who contacted the embassies or foreign press or police or anyone to ask questions? Surely there are 4 newspapers with journalists in New York City. There's no way they're answering to the mayor. You're telling me a Korean journalist writing for a Korean newspaper in Korean is going to check in with the mayor before going to print? Hey, did you know this? If somebody dies in a foreign country, their country's embassy handles their death certificate. Nobody from the embassy noticed the relatively high number of nationals murdered? Those countries didn't want to make a fuss? China wouldn't say anything about Chinese women being murdered in the US during Donald Trump's presidency? Literally every spare moment I had, like some new reason would pop into my head about why this made no sense. And it took me entirely out of the book. Like I nearly DNF'd it at this point, and the only reason I didn't was because it was good until this reveal. And I think for me, it all comes down to suspension of disbelief. I know that ghosts aren't real. Disbelief suspended. But this book takes place in our world, in a time that I lived through, starring humans, a thing that I am. This book was just asking me to ignore the fact that people just fundamentally don't act that way. I get that people don't always act logically. I get that sometimes things do get covered up. I get that people do bad things. But I felt like this book was asking me to believe that human beings operate 100% differently than I know they do. Maybe this is also because I'm a big conspiracy hater, in which I believe that like the idea of like large scale conspiracies I just find fundamentally kind of implausible, just based on how like people, the government and people, how people work, how groups of people work. I'm just not a fan. And in the end, Cora becomes the kind of like champion of all of the ghosts of the victims and burns the mayor's mansion, presumably killing him. And everybody claps. The end. Okay, spoilers over. We can all come back now. There were some interesting twists and turns, despite everything that I said. I really liked the ghosts, and I really enjoyed learning about the Hungry Ghost Festival. Honestly, there was some pretty spooky horror in there. But like, wow, I was so close to just DNFing it. I think I ended up giving it 2 stars, which, you know how like some people tell you to like find coffee shops by like looking for the ones with the 2-star reviews, because it's like, yeah, maybe the service was bad, maybe the atmosphere was shit, but that coffee was just way too good to justify 1 star. Like, I don't do that, but that is kind of how I felt about this book. And it certainly stuck with me. I think of all of the books that I've read here, that one has clung on to me like an angry little barnacle, but probably not for the reasons that the author would like. This was a standalone, and despite everything that I said, I would be open to reading more of Kylie Lee Baker's other work because I think her prose is really good. If you've read any of her other work, tell me, like, was this a one-off miss? Does anything batshit shit happen, pardon the pun, in her other works. Like, should I give her another chance? Anyway, those were all the murder books that I've read lately. I know this was a super weird and eclectic assortment, but I really enjoy reading different things sometimes, and so maybe you'll like some of these too. Have you read any of these? Do you want to read any of these? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're new here, this is kind of a different one for me. I usually do longer videos focused on one book, but May is a busy month for me, like I said, so it felt like a chance to do something different. And if you like this, maybe we'll do more. And we will do more, because the next video is going to talk about a few books with a different theme, and it's going to be way more lighthearted than these. And then it's back to my regularly scheduled content. This whole summer, I'm going to be focusing on a series that is near and dear to my heart. I am super excited about it. I would consider it like formative reading for me. Foundational reading for me. I am really excited to share it with you guys. And so if all of that sounds good and you want to be here for it, so hit subscribe. And if you hated this, we'll just never talk about it again. All right, bye.